There's a new KvK format coming that lets you change the troop type that benefits from a commander's buffs. So for example, instead of Isong buffing all archers, he might be able to buff all infantry or all cavalry stats, which is crazy. So in this video, I'm going to go over everything that was released in the latest patch note, which, man, this KvK format does actually look pretty spicy. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms, and I want to do two things today. First of all, I want to focus in on this new KvK format and tell you everything the developers have shared with us. From there, I want to go over the rest of the patch notes, which I have covered briefly in another video recently. If we skip past all the flavor text for this KvK, what you need to know is that in this new Season of Conquest, that's KvK Season 4 and beyond story, you'll have the chance to use new legendary equipment called artifacts and experiment with new commander pairings and fight for dominance under the new map and new building rules. So actually there's a bunch of things going on here. There's these new artifacts, there's new building rules, and there is a new map. I like all those things, but let's see what they say about them. First up, artifacts. In this story, you'll be able to claim one of several new pieces of legendary equipment called an artifact. When a secondary commander is equipped with an artifact, all of their skills that affect a single unit type will instead affect a different unit type, and this depends on the artifact. So there might be some artifact that makes it so that a commander's skills all get changed to benefit infantry or cavalry or archers, or I guess siege units, but hopefully they don't do anything with that. I don't know. I guess that could work for ranged combat, but let's say, for example, you have an artifact that changes all of a commander's skills to benefit infantry. You could put this on Isong, hypothetically, and all the skills on Isong that say, hey, they benefit archers, would now benefit infantry with the special artifact, and if you use Isong as the secondary. Now, this is an interesting idea because, you know, as an example, can you imagine? Sargon with Isong is kind of crazy. Applying AoE damage and debuffs that make targets take more skill damage is pretty cool. You could consider Nevsky. Can you imagine if you could make Nevsky work for infantry or make Nevsky work for archers? Like, Boudica Nevsky would be an insane march, right? Or Skippy Prime. You could make Skippy Prime potentially work with archers. There are some really interesting things that you could probably do with this. But remember, you equip this to the secondary commander. So a commander like Guan Yu, this really wouldn't work because he has to be the primary commander. And that's because his damage is cut in half if you make him the secondary. So I think there are probably some really cool pairings and changes. For example, at making Tamaris not an archer commander, all of a sudden, in my opinion, could make her a lot stronger, gives you a lot more options for who you could pair with. I am very interested to see how exactly artifacts will work and if we'll have just like lots of options for these swaps. I remember the developers said a long time ago they're going to let you put skills from one commander onto another commander. This is different than that. This is changing the skill around to benefit a different troop type, and I think it's really cool. The second thing that's interesting about this KvK is that there are building restrictions. In this new story, in the Lost Kingdom, Alliance fortresses can only be built in an area bordering a holy site or a pass. You do not need to capture the holy site or pass, presumably to be able to build the fortresses. So this is really interesting, and it's addressing a problem that I have talked about at length in a number of videos, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. So it's designing around the problem and giving us a different KvK format. And maybe this is just a test for something that will apply everywhere. But if we look at a KvK that's really contentious that I've been streaming and is active right now, I might be able to illustrate to you the true ridiculousness of fort building. And the thing that's so insane about fort building right now is that you can put one fort literally on top of another, right? Like here we have a JST fort. At least it, yeah, I don't, it's on my map. It looks like it's building maybe. Yeah, they have a building fort that is within the footprint of another fort that's already here. That's the 60 GT fort. But that's not even the weirdest thing. The weirdest thing that you can do with forts is you put one alliance fort on top of another, like you see over here. And you actually can build forts in a way such that you could only get one row of progress as an attacker at a time. So for those that are not familiar with territory building, a fort takes up a footprint, as does a flag, and there are basically, little blocks of territory that are being held up. And you can make it so an enemy can get only one block of progress per fort burn. So that's one block of progress per day by just building forts on top of each other. Now, these aren't even built on top of each other in a way that's like insane. Here's two that probably are. And I might even, here's two that are, where I might be able to show this a little bit better. But you can see the edge of the fort's territory goes all the way up to here, and then the other fort's territory goes all the way up to here. So you could get 2 rows of progress by burning this fort, which 2 rows of progress. That means if you want to actually get far, I mean, it takes days and days and days and days and days, and you gum up a map, and it just is not fun for the attackers or the defenders, in my estimation. And I'm offering this as kind of constructive feedback about the design of forts today, which is that the way they work, it just really slows down the pace of a KvK. So it's interesting that for this KvK format, this new KvK format, the design of the KvK format is potentially trying to address this to say, all right, fine. You can only build your forts in certain areas, which presumably those areas are small enough that you can't block off an entire part of a map and delay the sort of evolution of the KvK for weeks at a time, which is how KvK works today. So this is kind of interesting with these building restrictions. And then from here, they're adding a new map. Now, this I think is awesome. New Lost Kingdom map has been added. Governors from 6 camps will experience the thrill of development and conflict, vie for dominance, and add a new triumphant chapter to the history books. So flavor text aside, having a new map is really cool, and what they told us here is that there's 6 camps. So this is a 6 war camp KvK, and the only 6 war camp KvK we have currently is King of the Nile. And I actually really like King of the Nile. I find it to be a great format for a non-Imperium kingdom, and most kingdoms are not Imperium. So I really like that addition. Hopefully, the new map will be great for Imperium kingdoms as well, and I think it probably will be, as long as it doesn't have the same sort of matchmaking system that we have in Nile KvK, which will presumably be the case. So this is coming soon. I don't know if my restart kingdom will delay queuing so that we can do this one. I think we've already skipped 2 times, maybe even 3 times. So we're probably on the verge of taking our next KvK pop. So if this comes really soon, it's possible that I'll do this on my restart. I might alternatively move account or maybe migrate an account to participate in this or to spectate it. Or if people actually enter into this one, maybe I'll get a bunch of information from them about how it's working. So if you want to see when that happens, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're already 8 minutes into a Chisgule gaming video, you're probably getting some value. So consider doing me that favor of throwing a like onto the video and subscribing to the channel. Now from here, they covered a bunch of things that I talked about in a previous video, including the Alliance Mobilization event. But let's see if they've given us anything new. Sign up for this event with your alliance. This event is only open to alliances in Season of Conquest. You earn points for your alliance during this event by accepting and completing quests, increasing your alliance's total points. Now, I mentioned previously that I have seen this in literally every other game I have played in this genre. So this is a very common event style, and the event is divided into 5 different leagues. The first time you take part in this event, all alliances will be placed in the Fearless Bronze League by default. All alliances in the same league are then placed into groups, and that's who you compete against. Based on your ranking within that group, you either get promoted or demoted, or remain in the same league when the competition ends. And this is a recurring event. So presumably this will happen monthly. Maybe it could be every couple weeks, maybe even every 2 or 3 weeks. And this is honestly kind of fun. And the thing that I like the most about this is that, look, we may not be able to fight certain alliances in KvK, but if we get grouped with them in this alliance event, I think that's also kind of cool. A big part of this game, beyond the fighting, is actually the sort of preparation for fighting and the sort of competition leading up to the battle, like Eve of the Crusade, and a whole bunch of events within KvK that sort of give you rewards based on ranks. All that to say, I think the sort of hype up competitions are actually super cool. And if you wanted evidence of that, you know, just look at this KvK that we're spectating over here with 1960 and 365 and 1093 and Mimi and, you know, and so many others. Without naming every single kingdom here, the point is that when they had Eve of the Crusade, people were just watching like every couple hours to see who had scored the highest in Eve of the Crusade. So I think there's just a ton of evidence that points to those style of alliance-based competitions being really fun to watch. And I am definitely looking forward to this new event. Now, from here, there's one last thing that they're doing, which is a big change to the formation system. Not the changes I was expecting, and I hope that the changes I am, you know, sort of hoping for will show up in game maybe within the next month or so, but they're adding the ability to travel for gems. So this is a definite pay-to-win addition to an already kind of pay-to-win system. Once you've used up all your chances to travel using action points, you can now spend gems. It is interesting. I wonder if someone like was watching my video and heard me say I can only justify buying more bundles if I need to spend more gems on stuff, and then literally within weeks, here this is, a new way to spend gems, which is kind of interesting. Added new windfalls. Every time you travel, you have a chance to earn luck. The higher your luck, the higher your chance of encountering a windfall. There is a limit to how much luck you can earn, and your luck resets every day. So my guess here is that if you're getting lots of luck when you're spending action points, but haven't actually gotten your windfall yet, you might want to spend gems until you get your windfall, and then your luck chance resets. And so you'll have to decide at that point, do I want to spend more gems to get another windfall, or do I want to stop? And I think that the sort of optimization will now be entirely around getting your windfall. This, of course, depends on how much this system actually works for sort of bad luck prevention, we'll call it, and how aggressively it will boost your chances of getting something good. It will also depend on the sort of gem cost. We were talking in my live stream to try to guess, like, what would be a gem cost you would pay? And, you know, look, the problem with traveling is that I could get a 15,000 gold token. So how many gems are you asking me to pay for 15,000, gold tokens, right? I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know how many gems I would pay for a, troop load armament that I'm going to get. I think the reality is that the way that you ought to think about this is that there is going to be some gem cost and AP cost per good armament that you get. And you just have to think about how you're going to spend over the course of many days to get to a good armament. And is that worth it to you? And I don't know the answer yet. It's going to depend so much on what that gem cost is. But they have also improved the description of the rules for traveling with the recommended commanders. I do wonder what the recommended commanders are even doing for you. I don't actually know. And the windfall and traveling with gems feature will not be immediately available. The opening will be announced in a future announcement. That's actually interesting. I don't remember that being a part of the description previously, but they're patching it into the game. They're telling us they're patching it into the game, but they're also telling us, but not right away. And then armaments. They've optimized the armament icons. Armament icons now display applicable formations. They've optimized the display of the armaments in your inventory, adding formation effects to the inventory interface. Optimized the armament locking. You can now lock armaments from your inventory. They've optimized armament recycling. It now requires authentication. I really hope that if I don't have authentication active, that I don't have to do this. I assume that will be the case, because I recycle so many armaments, even when I multi-select, I don't want to have to enter passwords. And then optimized inscriptions added a more detailed rules for inscriptions. So I talked about this previously, but the weirdness of inscriptions is that when you put a new inscription on an armament, it overwrites all inscriptions on the armament, which means that if you had a double inscription armament, which of course I have not gotten one of those, but if you did, If you try to put a new inscription on that, it will overwrite both inscriptions and there will only be one. So chances are if you get a double inscription armament, you're just going to leave it as it is and never do anything with it, which is a little weird. I thought it was like replace one inscription with another. But in some ways, that makes it so that getting a good double inscription armament is like so impossibly rare that we don't have to chase it anymore, which I suppose that could be considered a good thing, right? Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Of course, right now, the thing that players really want with armaments and inscriptions is a change to the randomness. In other words, they don't want it to be random. They want it to be something they can work incrementally towards. And I think the best thing we can do in the view of the world from this patch note is sort of manage to the randomness and give yourself the best odds of getting something good. And until you get something good, you've gotten a bunch of things that are not good. And then once you get something good, you've landed on it. And what did it cost you on average to get there? And I think the average cost is so high that it's very difficult as a player to really appreciate, like, okay, I spent, I don't know what the number is going to be, 10,000 gems to get a good armament, or however many action points, and I got a good armament. The other thing that's a little weird about armaments is that when you get a stat boost from an armament, it's actually a big deal. And initially, you can get a bunch of stat boosts really, really quickly. So the worse your armaments are, the easier it is to get improvements, and the higher value it is to actually spend gems or whatever it takes to get a better armament. Because, you know, when you've got an armament like this, I guess this is Minamoto, that's a bad example, like this on Guan Yu, like I have an inscription, I have an all damage number, and I have a defense number. And the all damage and the defense actually they just rolled super low. Like, these are bad rolls. It would be pretty, like, it would be pretty easy-ish, you would think, to improve from this potentially, where, like, all you'd have to do is get a third good stat that's relevant for infantry here, and then also have robust, and, like, all of a sudden it's a really good armament. But I mean, like, even that's super rare, so I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about this update. I think that the new KvK format is going to be pretty cool. And I think it's probably going to be a win. So just like how I would say Nile KvK is actually a big win, it's a very fun format in my opinion. I think this new KvK format could also be super cool. And the idea that you can swap around a commander to sort of benefit some other troop type is also super cool. The thing I would be looking for is the most busted mechanics possible. Like, for example, Boudica makes it so that you're immune to silence. I mean, I don't know of any other commanders that have a self-silence. I'd have to look around. But there's probably some commanders that have some sort of busted mechanics where if you use them as a secondary, like, I don't know, man, Attila not for cavalry could get really crazy. Or, like, what about garrisoning? What if you could make Xeno but for archers? Right? Like, so now you would have an Amonitory Zenobia garrison, potentially? I'm just spitballing for some, like, really insane stuff that you could do with changing the troop type that a commander benefits. But that's enough for now. If you enjoyed the video, throw a like on here, subscribe to the channel. If you're looking for a more detailed review about the idea that you can spend gems on your armaments, I covered that in a previous video. Card will be in the end screen in just a second.